Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for what will be the final part of my nocturnal mission against Le Mans in Down in Flames Wild Blue Yonder. Apologies for the necessity of this final bit. I will remember to keep a careful look at my phone's battery next time. Hands up any of you who want me heading your ground cruise, checking your kite over pre-flight. No, no one. I don't always forget stuff, I promise. But anyway, that's all by the by. So, when I left us last video, it was just about to be the final turn of the mission. So effectively the last turn the Germans have to inflict any meaningful damage on the British force. But also a turn in which they had some very difficult decisions to make, because as you can see, just as a reminder, poor Yabs, he entered the combat zone and got jumped and pretty much curb stomped by both the mosquitoes, which was a bit unfortunate, really, because he came in full of promise and no doubt full of fight. Meanwhile, his colleagues in the lumbering Junkers 88 have been doing their best to make an impression, but it's not exactly been the Luftwaffe's finest hour. On the British side, the Mosquitoes have done a pretty reasonable job of keeping the bombers safe. I mean, to be fair, the majority of the damage that have been suffered by all three aircraft, or at least two of them at any rate, um, I'd say has been inflicted by flak. I mean, certainly in the case of the Lancaster, but maybe I'm being a bit harsh, actually. That plane took all its damage from the German fighters, and yeah. Yes, all right. Well, the flak accounted for a lot. The German night fighters have been trying. So this is the situation in which they find themselves. Now, um, the Junkers is now the leading aircraft in the turn order, and it has a problem because irrespective of what its radar return is, it has an extremely poor hand. It won't be shooting at anybody. But an important consideration, and one that's valid for both German aircraft, is that disengaging early while there are still enemy fighters present is a very dangerous thing to do, because you're effectively turning your back on an active enemy. And the disengagement chart actually reflects this by modifying your result based on whether there are enemy fighters present or not. So given that both German aircraft still have quite a bit of fuel, I'm going to venture to say that it actually would be smarter if they stayed in the combat area and did their best to survive until the end of the scenario forces a natural separation of the two sides. Um, Although that may sound a bit counterintuitive, at the same time, it's not really. You're keeping the pressure on until the British cross the channel. So I'm going to stick to that strategy, but looking at Yabs's hand, I'm going to have to try to make darn sure he survives, because having committed him to this risky approach, it would not look great if the Germans lost that plane and Yabs along with it. I mean, the British, technically the British player would have no idea what's lurking in the German player's hands. And he would probably be, a bit nervous, especially given the condition of that poor Lancaster. But equally, he's got good reason for confidence. He has a very powerful offensive hand going on there. So, yes, let's see what happens, because as ever with these things, the radar could make or break it. So what about our friend the Junkers? He has got choices this turn. Well, in theory, he has got choices. What he might attempt to do to help ensure Yabs's survival is there's nothing he can do to a bomber with that hand, but there is equally nothing to stop him engaging that mosquito. So he is going to maneuver against the Mozzie, which is probably... and the Mozzie can't actually do anything about it. So Unbelievable. There I go. You see, that'll teach me to shoot my mouth off. I've been talking all through this session about how the poor Junkers is at a disadvantage because it's such a clumsy beast. And here it is getting the edge on a Mozzie. Not only that, tailing a Mozzie. But of course, all good things come to an end, and he's reached the limit of what he can usefully do. So now it comes to the Mozzie. This is not looking great, really. He really could do with different cards. And there's actually no point keeping any of the offensive ones because really he can't get away from that, not without changing altitude and effectively leaving the combat area. I mean, he'll still be around, but as it's the last turn and he can't change altitude again, there's nothing he can really do. So what he's going to do is he's going to cash in 3 of those or discard them. Oh, wait, do you know what? Whoa, 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 hold your horses, Andrew, because you have not drawn for the Mozzie's radar. He might not be able to do anything. Bad boy, don't get ahead of yourself. Oh, no, I stand corrected. He most definitely can do stuff. Right, he is going to discard those 3 because there are not going to be any rainy days left. And okay, yes, that does increase his odds of survival a bit. And so finally, we get to young Yabs, who I hope survives because historically he survived the war to become a businessman. So, you know, it'd be nice if he makes it through. Wow, his radar's definitely not on the blink despite the damage to his aircraft. The only thing is he's got nothing he can usefully do. So he would normally just draw more cards, but as he is the last plane in the set, that is it, really. Time, distance, no doubt lingering fuel concerns all take their effect, and the combatants separate as the final turn of the game ends. So there we go. We have the conclusion of that night mission. The only thing that remains now is to count up the score. And I'll start with the British. So they get... the first thing you do working down the victory point awards is to check for enemy aircraft destroyed. Now, technically, that's a big fat egg because they've damaged a couple, but they have not destroyed anybody. So what about each enemy aircraft damaged? Well, they have damaged poor Yabs's fighter, and the previous Messerschmitt 110 was damaged when it broke off. So the British get 4 points in total for both of those damage results. Then it's each friendly strike aircraft, and by that they mean the bombers, to go over target and survive undamaged. Now, just to clarify with this game, because a bomber that's taken hits but remains on its undamaged side is not classed as damaged. You only count the ones that come back flipped onto their reverse side as damaged. So 2 heavy bombers have returned undamaged, which nets the British a total of 14 more points. So their running tally is at 18 now. And finally, the mission results. So I'm afraid between missing RIP and various other factors, the fact that it was really, really dark for one, I can't really complain about that. Excuse me. Darkness is really a keystone of Bomber Harris's strategy, so okay, I'll take the darkness. But anyway, we inflicted 11 points of damage on the target, which nets 12 victory points. So the British end that mission with a respectable 30 points. So what about the Germans? Each enemy aircraft destroyed outright. Well, like the British, that's a big fat 0. They did not manage to blow anything out the sky, although I will say they came commendably close to knocking down that Lancaster. Excuse me, sorry. I, for one, am very glad they didn't, because if they had shot that down, heavy bombers are worth 20 VP. Ouch, that is eye-watering in this game. They do, however, get 10 VP for damaging it, which I do not appreciate with my British hat on. They didn't force any bombers to jettison their ordnance prior to reaching the target. And they obviously don't score any bombing results. So the Germans have 10 and the British have 30, which is quite a respectable lead for the British. And I suppose the $64,000 question, given that this is part of a campaign game, is how has it affected the overall campaign? Well, let's see. Let me just add the totals up. I'm afraid maths was never my strong suit, so I'll have to beg your indulgence while I do this manually on a piece of paper. Not bad. Okay. So at the end of that mission, and looking at how things stand overall, the Allies have a total of 428 points after 7 missions. The Germans have 366. Now that sounds like a significant Allied lead, and it is, but because the points in this scenario are balanced against the historical result, to get a significant breakaway from the historical result, the Allies, if they want to win significantly, they need a bigger than 220 point gap. And I'm just going to do some more maths. Please excuse me while I'm being boring. So at the moment, the Allies are leading by a mere 62. Which is actually really bad because 95 or less is actually an appalling Allied result versus an outstanding Axis one. So I have a horrible feeling that unless I do much, much, much better in the final mission, I don't want to put any pressure on the United States, but I regret to say, guys, you've got to really pull your fingers out here and pull an absolute blinder of a final daylight bombing mission, because otherwise we might be sunk for this one. I will not score very well in this campaign at all, despite the fact that I am leading significantly. So that does make it challenging. The Germans get some compensation for the horrendous attritional grinding match they're being subjected to. But anyway, taking that mission on its own merits, I think the British did very well. Usually they come back minus a bomber or two, which can be quite brutal. I think the radar draws were in our favour, and the very short duration of this mission, just a quick hop into France and back, made it so much easier. When you have the British going all the way to Berlin, and I have played a couple of those missions, it is nasty and it is painful, and you have never got enough mosquitoes to cover the ground. Equally as the Germans, it can be very frustrating because, as you've seen from this game, the vagaries of your radar behavior, and of course if the British turn up with window, which they can do on a couple of missions to confuse your radar, that can really mess things up. And if that happens on a critical mission, it can cost you heavily in points. But anyway, that's all by the by. I hope that this mini-series has given you a bit of a sense of how night combat works in Down in Flames, Wild Blue Yonder. It feels very, very different to the day campaigns, as it should. And if you play the combined campaign where you alternate between one type of mission and the other, it can make for a bit of a jarring experience because you're having to shift your mental gears to deal with the very different play styles. But it does so in a very good way because it really makes you appreciate the different approaches, the different techniques. and the very different environment that comes with a night versus a day mission. And I like how the game models that very simplistically. You know, the rules of this game are pretty straightforward and easy and centered around these marvelous card decks. But I like the chrome, I mean, like the Shrag music and the blockbusters. I like how these details are just added in to increase that sense of why this side of the campaign is different. So there we go. Um, Before I end off, I'm going to make what I suppose is a slightly selfish request. Those of you who follow the development of this game probably know that the Pacific side of Down in Flames is still on GMT Games P500. Um, and it's only about 50 orders away from hopefully becoming a reality one day. Now, I shouldn't mind too much because, as I'm going to show you, I have the Zero and Corsairs and Hellcats aircraft from the original Pacific modules, which were published in the early 2000s, and they're fully compatible with these new rules, which is great for me. But for those people who've never had a chance to experience them, I do recommend the Pacific and Asian theatre because those missions are very different to the European ones. You get carrier to carrier combat for one, which is incredible. So if you're minded to, and again, apologies because this is a selfish request on my part, do go over to GMT Games, get onto their P500 page, and just make a small commitment to wanting Imperial Eagles to become a reality. Because if, speaking as someone who plays this game a lot and loves it, if you're into this side of, tactical aerial combat with a very decent strategic mission generating system, I can guarantee you won't be disappointed. If it's anything like the original Zero and Corsairs and Hellcats, then it will be an amazing package, and it will be a beautiful complement to the European theatre. So on that note, do consider it. I mean, I don't want to order anybody around. That'd be the last thing I want to do, but do give it some thought. And again, thank you all so much. I've really appreciated you having along with me as I've sort of explored the night combat element of Down in Flames. I do hope that you've enjoyed these videos. Thank you so much. I see there's already a couple of comments appearing on the ones I uploaded earlier today. So I will get round to answering you guys. Thank you so much for the feedback. Really, really appreciate it. As always, thanks so much for the pleasure of your company, which I really do value a great deal. The obligatory and very heartfelt shout out to my veterans on the channel. Thank you guys so much. You make it all worth it. To anyone who's visiting for the first time, you're more than welcome. If this is the first of my videos you've watched, what are you doing here? This is the tail end one. Go back and watch the first video and watch them in order, please. But no, you are very, very welcome. If it's Down in Flames that brought you here, I've done a few videos on this particular game. If you're into wargaming generally, please do have a meander around the channel. I hope you find other things that you like. But as always, guys, whoever you are and wherever in the world you might be watching from, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care. Bye.